How I would describe Bluefields to people who never heard of it, it's kind of like it's a coast, like a Caribbean coast.
It is the place that Mom always referred to as home, and so I feel like I grew up with it subconsciously as my home too. The water, the breeze, the warmth, it's just so welcoming, so warm. Yeah, it's home.
You may not notice it at first glance, but we're from two different worlds. Now, I don't mean two planets, I mean two cultures. My name is George W. Campbell, and I'm a filmmaker. I'm a first-generation American with parents from another country. This makes me a dual citizen. My mother was born in Bluefields, Nicaragua, while my father was born in New Jersey to Nicaraguan parents. As a young man growing up, it was very rare to see other Nicaraguans in public or in the media. It was always just family. It was strange being part of a group that seemed so rich but had little representation. Eventually, I started thinking, has being a dual citizen influenced other artists? So, I decided to speak to 3 Nicaraguan-American artists in the D.C. metro area to find out.
So the part of where my parents are from in Nicaragua is Bluefields, Nicaragua, the barrio of Old Bank.
Do I know the part of Nicaragua my family is from? Yes, we're from Bluefields.
The parts of Nicaragua that my family is from is Bluefields, Nicaragua. Bluefields, or Nicaragua in general, to people is basically the black side.
Nicaragua is located in Central America, right between Costa Rica and Honduras. Our families all originate from the city of Bluefields on the Atlantic coast. It's one of the most cosmopolitan environments in all of Central America. Most of Bluefields' population is of African descent. Because of this, and our proximity to the Caribbean, we have the food, music, and culture of the Caribbean with the languages of Central America. It's odd and leads to most people not knowing we exist. People from Bluefields began immigrating to the United States during the 1970s and 80s. They usually settled in either New York, Florida, or the Washington D.C. metro area. The latter is where we grew up.
I don't think that they insisted on instilling the culture into us. I think it was a very natural progression over time. Obviously, they were able to tell us lots of stories and make sure the food was still around and all of that. It was just laced throughout my experience growing up.
I think my family, when it comes down, they are who they are. I don't think they deliberately said, this is how we do it home, so this is how it's supposed to happen. It's more or less about like, this is how they were brought up and what they're into, and this is their family structure and things like that.
We visited a lot. We visited very often. For a while, it was like every other year.
I was always there during the summers and things like that. Like every time school was over, I'd spend like a couple months down there.
Seeing like the different people there and the different cultures and the mixtures of different people down there, it just made me think about life differently. Outside of my family, I didn't know other Nicaraguans, and if I did, they weren't like me.
My Puerto Rican friends, for example, maybe they speak Spanish, like that's their primary language, and they have all these experiences that we don't necessarily have. A lot of times you feel, okay, am I Latina enough or am I Black enough? Like there are, like you said, the experiences that you don't grow up with or certain things that you don't have in the house. It's been hard. I think I try to enter spaces of like Latinx communities. I remember like in college we had a lot of it, but again, it was just nobody was ever from Nicaragua.
They tried to take my Latino card. That's what they'll try to take, which they could gladly take because I can't take away how I look. You can't sit there and tell me I'm not Black.
How do you think like growing up in the culture and being like in between being kind of like being Black, Latino, how does that affect the way you see yourself as an artist?
Oh, it shows a lot in my music, more or less. really based off hip hop, so everything that I've learned here, but like I take what I've learned from that and I try my best to implement it in my beats.
Type of art that I make most often is music, mostly songwriting, and then the whole digital part of it too, outside of like the piano.
I do collage, I do prints, like printmaking, and I do digital collage. It started like during the quarantine when the pandemic started. I knew growing up like I didn't want to do anything else. I wasn't really good at anything else besides art anyway.
When I was a kid, I tried everything, tried every sport. It wasn't, not saying like I didn't like it, I just didn't get that kind of push to it. I was in church, so like I did a lot of steel pan stuff. So like I found myself every Wednesday, every Saturday, every Sunday, and then when concerts came every day, I was right there playing steel pans and I was doing music right then and there.
I feel like I'm very in tune with my emotions and I have a lot of thoughts. So I feel like growing up, I just had a lot to say. I wanted to write poetry. I wanted to write artistic ways of expressing my emotions. I wanted to like send a message. And that obviously evolved into songwriting. And then my grandfather taught me how to play guitar when I was young. And then my dad taught me how to play piano when I was young. And I feel like those are the two instruments that kind of support the whole songwriting thing.
So this right here is called Apart. It's a digital collage, and Apart stands for always predicting anxious, ridiculous thoughts. When I was making this at the time, I was struggling with like my anxiety a little bit. And I would go outside, I would go for walks, and I found nature being that place where I can be free. I didn't have any thought. I just kind of took in what I saw and tried to make peace out of that. So this was sort of like a kind of message and reminder that when you're outside and when you're in that happy place or in that zone of unconsciousness, like those thoughts kind of disappear.
We played a lot of reggae music and soca music, so it's like kind of songs that I've already heard, like in my home, and then sometimes it's things like I introduced to and things like that. And then after that, when I was in my middle school years, I started rapping. So when I started doing that, that was my true introduction to hip hop. And hip hop is something I learned on my own. And that's when I got into Dilla, Madlib, Alchemist, Awali, Ono. I got into a lot of those producers because those producers told stories with their beat tapes. So my thing, I always wanted to tell stories with my music. And even if someone could just hear it as a beat, to me it's a sound sculpture. I sculpt what my mind is thinking with the sounds that I make. And from at that point on, junior year, going into my senior year, from that point on, that was my thing.
I think more about what it means for me to be able to express myself and how the things that I'm afforded now are things that my parents or my grandparents weren't necessarily afforded growing up. I think that it's become a really salient part of my identity. I think it's something that I'm proud of. I remember growing up and realizing that not everybody had that experience. Not everybody had even been on a plane, much less, outside of the country or outside of the continent.
I don't think that I was ever in an opportunity where I had to pretend to be somebody else in front of my friends, because this is who I was. I was a person who always loved where I was from, talked about it all the time.
I'm still trying to connect with the culture. I sort of branched off to discover my own voice in a way. I do wish that I can involve more of my culture into my art, especially on like my Nicaraguan side, but I just wish I was more exposed to it.
I think generations after us are going to have an opportunity to embrace it more. I feel like that's the direction that a lot of us are going towards, is embracing being part of two cultures.
I feel like in the future, like parents and people would just have more open conversations about it.
I have a lot of hope for the future generations that they will begin to break down these labels and these categories that we've used to make it easy and palatable to talk about people.
You are who you are because of where your descendants are and where you're living. These are the type of things that make you who you are.
No suggestions. Drink it.
But I didn't wanna.
Yeah. It's my class. It's a class. It's a And that's a wrap.